Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to jamplay.com. My name is Stuart and welcome to my humble abode in Los Angeles. And this is week number 10. This is our final week of tools and techniques. A class which I've had a lot of fun teaching for the last 10 weeks and coming up with some stuff that I think is important to know and learn for being a better guitar player. This class was geared towards playing blues, but all the things that I've taught here in the last 10 weeks all filter down and have everything to do with practically any genre of music, whatever it is that you're playing. We've been talking about, the real serious nuts and bolts of playing the guitar. Like, what do you need to know? Well, you got to be a good rhythm player. What do you play when somebody else is playing a solo? What do you play when you're not playing a solo? Well, you're playing rhythm guitar. That's what you're playing. So we talked about rhythm. We talked about the chord changes that the kind of chords that you're supposed to know for playing blues that everybody knows. You're going to a blues jam. You want to walk up on stage and you want to feel confident because you hear and you see what other players are playing and you go, aha, this is what I have to play. So you've got this in your back pocket to go to. These chord voicings. These chord voicings that you can play with this rhythm feel attached to it. And now you're definitely in the game. Then we got into arpeggios and soloing and putting arpeggios together with the minor pentatonic scale. Touched a little bit about patented things that you have to know when you're, to start a solo with, or to start a song. If the band leader turns to you and says, "Kick it off," well, what does that mean? What that means is that you're going to go 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3. You got the pickup. That means you're kicking off the song. It's in your hands. You're the one who's setting the tone for what you're going to play. And along with that goes how to start off a solo. So we did a week where I picked some very famous kickoffs, one that B.B. King was certainly known for, and there were variations on it that he came up with, variations on what he came up with to play that we've all heard him do. Some Albert King, a little bit of Freddie King, touched a little bit on Otis Rush. We did a week where we talked about minor blues, what to play and what not to play, how to stay away from the major third. And then ultimately it all kind of worked its way up to last week, where I talked about a different way to approach using pentatonic scales. If you're starting to get interested in things that sound a little more jazzy, this is a great place to start, because this is something that jazz musicians, the great jazz players of the 50s started doing when they were developing bebop, and they were coming up with the concepts of superimposing different chords and different triads over the chords that they were playing in the songs, and how to use that for soloing. And they also came up with alternative scales to play. And one of the things that they did was they took the idea of pentatonics and figured out how to not only play things related to the minor pentatonic scale or the blues scale, but take it and subtract a note here, add a note here, and it's still a 5-note scale, which makes it a pentatonic scale, only there's a slight variation on the sound of it. We did that last week. We also did the idea of taking a different minor pentatonic scale, and instead of playing off the root minor pentatonic, we substituted a different scale over a chord to give it something somewhat of a jazzier sound, like this. that kind of sound, which isn't all the way to jazz, but it has something to do with jazz. So it's a great introduction. It's a great way to start to get yourself playing things that may be outside of your comfort zone. Maybe they're things that you've always wanted. You've always wondered how this guy does this. Well, this is how he did it. So that's what we dealt with for the last 10 weeks. And what I thought I would do today was, besides opening up the floor to questions, if you've got a question, please type it in and send it to Chris, and it'll get relayed to me, and I'll be glad to answer whatever you want to answer, whatever you'd like answered. But I thought I'd talk today about, just review the things that are the fundamentals, you know, and go over them. And some of you, if not all of you, or a small group of you, maybe you already know all of these things. But it never hurts to review these things, because in the learning process we tend to forget a lot of things, and especially us older players, you know, of which I'm one. You know, there's things that I learned 20, 30 years ago that you know, I'll be looking through, you know, some books that I'm working on, things that I'm studying, because I've gone back to school to get my bachelor's degree. So I'm looking at, I see things and I go, oh, wait, why does that sound familiar? And I go, well, because I learned how to do that 30 years ago. Well, I'm looking at it again, and it still has relevance. It's still important. So it's always good to go over some of these things. So if that's all right with all of you, and I hope it is, I'm basically going to go back and start with week 1 and talk a little bit about rhythm. Rhythm is unquestionably, oh, somebody has a question. Anthony D. Fratto makes me wonder where jazz lets off and blues begins. Well, Anthony, to answer your question, jazz is blues. The blues and the language of blues has everything to do with the language of jazz. The greatest jazz musicians that have ever lived were all great blues players in their own way. You know, they might not have been bending all the notes or bending any of the notes, but they played blues. They loved the feel, the texture, the sound, the attitude, the vibe. It's the sound, it's that very seductive sound of the minor third, the flat third. When you hear the blues and you hear, that's how jazz players tend to interpret. Still sounds like blues, right? It's not this, but it's, that's still the blues. So blues and jazz are you know, they are one in this. They in a sense they are one and the same. They come from each other. You know, the blues was around first. You know, the blues gave birth to everything else, and as I like to explain to my students at Musicians Institute, you know, jazz was born in New Orleans. That's where jazz took root. That's where it was given life. Whereas New Orleans is in the deep South. Well, the blues was born in the deep South. So these musicians, these guys who invented jazz back in the 20s and the 30s, who were playing, you know, these were the musicians who played great society parties and balls and things like that. You know, they took the language of the blues and brought it to the music of the day that they were playing. So that's pretty much how the blues became integrated into the sound of jazz. It was there all the time. It's been there all the time. It's just a different attitude. Instead of bending the notes, you know, when I played that little, you know, I did that. play 2/5. So that's, to answer your question, they are one and the same. They're totally related, you know. So anyway, getting back to what I was talking about originally, rhythm is without question as important, if not more important, than the kind of notes that you're playing. Yes, harmony has everything to do. And when I say harmony, I'm referring to, like, okay, well, am I playing, what are the notes that I'm featuring versus the chord that I'm playing? Since we're playing blues, and the track I'm going to be soloing over is in A, while the notes of the chord are A7. The notes of the chord are A, C sharp, E, and G. Those are the notes of the chord. So when I use the word harmony, I'm referring to the notes in the chord when I go. Okay, but it's how you play those notes. It's the rhythm that you bring to those notes when you play a phrase, like, you know. That's the idea of rhythm. You know, I didn't play everything square on the beat. I tried to anticipate. I tried to play over the bar line. So we learn about that from having very well grounded, strong rhythm chops. So let's go over a couple of things that I taught week 1 and just review them. And we'll just play 2 choruses along with the track. The first part that I talked about was the first part that we all learn when we learn how to play a Chuck Berry song. Well, that came from this. It just got changed rhythmically. It just got eighth notes applied to it in a different manner. And this is just root 5 on the 6th and the 5th string, 5th and 7th fret, and we're going to take our pinky and just add the 6th. And we're going to play that with nothing but downstrokes. That's all downstrokes. It's not this. It's not this. It's all down. We go through all 12 bars. We play the 4 chord. Just move the same fingering up to the 10th fret. Back down, then we're going to get to the 5 chord. We're going to play at the 12th fret. Or if you want, you can do it on the 5th and the 4th string at the 7th fret. Now, I recommend that you learn it both ways because there's a slightly different character that comes to it when you and to me, call me crazy, but what I've always found is this keeps me with the time a little bit better because you think about getting, you notice that I slid. Well, that little slide or slur, however you want to refer to it, has something to do with the feel. So that's the first part. The next part is the chord riff. And we're going to take this A triad and we're going to play this right here at the 5th, 6th, and 7th frets, 4th, 3rd, top 2 strings. We're going to do that little hammer on. We're going to hammer from the flat 3rd, like that. And we're going to pick up that little D triad. That's a D triad. Actually, it's a D over A, because the bottom note is A, but it is a D triad. And then we're going to come back to the chord. Just like that. That's the chord riff. Now the last part that you're going to hear on this track is a single note line that kind of shadows what the bass is doing. It's not playing exactly what the bass is doing, but it's so close to it that you kind of have to listen carefully to tell, is he actually doubling the bass, or is it off a little? Is there 1 or 2 note difference? Well, it's actually 1 or 2 note difference. But rhythmically, it's very close to what the bass is doing. This other guitar is doing this. So if you've been looking at the tab, and I think we have the tab up, I hope you had it up. Sorry, Chris, but I just got going there. Those are the 3 parts. So I'm going to put the track on, and feel free to play along with it, and we'll just play 2 or 3 choruses and grab one of those parts and just really sit on that part as best as you can. All right? So here's the track. Whoa! No, that's John Coltrane. I don't think that's the right thing to play. Sorry about that. I have no idea why that happened. Here we go. All right. Sorry about that. How that feels. All right, now I'm going to play the single note line. There's your shuffle feel. There's your basic shuffle. And it's very, very important to know those parts, because if you get on a stage, if you're somebody who's, you know, if you're going to a blues jam, an open mic jam, when the bars open up, and I'm sure there are plenty of you out there that are, you want to, and there's another guitar player up there, you got to think fast about what part do I grab. And I learned that years and years and years ago, a long time ago. It's like you get up there with another guitar player, man, you better know, you better have something in your back pocket, because, you know, this guy, you know, so you never know what somebody's going to play. So, you know, you might get up there with somebody who really knows what they're doing, and they come up with their, and they play a really good part, and you have to, you know, you pretty much got to think on your feet, you know, well, what do I play? Maybe I don't need to play that much, because he's not playing too much, but he's covering a fair amount of ground. So you want to grab a part that isn't. So maybe, and that keeps you in the groove, that keeps you in the ballpark, that keeps everybody in the band happy right there, and you're playing and communicating with the other guitar player. And if he's doing like a single note part, or if he's doing that, then you could pick up, you could pick that up, or you could do that part, play the chordal thing. That's why these things are important to know. And if you're just playing along with backing tracks, these things are just, it's just as important to know these when you're playing along with backing tracks, because I can tell you that I remember back at week 1, I'll never forget this, somebody said, how do you keep it interesting when you're just playing the same part? Well, what I said to this person was, you have to realize that you have to take a very selfless position at that point, because your job is to play rhythm. Your job is to be support. You're supporting the singer, you're supporting the rhythm section, you're supporting another guitar player, or you're supporting a soloist at that moment. So you've got to be comfortable with the idea of doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And that's just a concept that comes to every genre of music. It's all about comping. In the end, it's all about comping and playing rhythm, and playing the right rhythm, and being in time, and having the right sound, and listening to what other people are doing, so you can make a somewhat educated guess as to what to play, with being complementary, and being complementary to the harmony, and being complementary to the other musicians that you're playing with, and giving the people who are listening to you, you know, you're nodding to them that you want them to understand things rhythmically, that you want them to, you know, it's not just about dazzling people with your chops, you know, it's, you know, you can dazzle people with your rhythm chops too, believe me. That's certainly possible, and happens all the time. So if there's no other questions about that, I thought I would just review quickly some of the basic chord shapes and voicings that we do. And when we play blues, we're playing blues here in a major key. Some people make the mistake of saying, well, I'm playing a blues in minor, because they say they're playing, they're using the minor pentatonic scale, and they think they're playing a blues in minor. No, you're not. If you're playing A7 and D7 and E7, those are major chords. They're dominant chords. They're dominant chords. That's the chord character, but they are major chords, and you're playing the minor pentatonic scale against that dominant chord. You're not playing minor. You're not playing in minor. So you want to get that terminology right, because I've seen a lot of people trip themselves up thinking like that. So what are the chords? Well, we're playing dominant chords. Chris, you might want to pick up week number 2. What are the notes that make up an A7 chord? Well, we've got A in the root, we've got C sharp, we've got E, which is the 5th, and then we've got C, then we got C sharp, which is the major 3rd. We've got A, sharp, E, and G. G is the 7th. And those are the 4 notes in the chord. They're the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. And we don't refer, you can refer to it and say, well, it's the minor 7th or it's the flat 7. It's a 7th. It's not the major, it's not the natural 7th or the major 7th. It's a 7th. The interval is a 7th. It's still considered a 7th. So G in this case is the 7th. Now there's our chord. Now the same intervals make up a D7 and an E7. You've got D, which is the root. You've got F sharp, which is the 3rd. You've got A, which is the 5th, and you've got C, which is the 7th. And then the same holds true for E7, which is E, G sharp, B, and D. So those are your chords. There's many ways to play them. I tend to favor this voicing, which doesn't have a root in it. There's no root present in this chord. I'm playing at the 5th fret, I'm playing G on the 4th string. I'm playing C sharp on the 3rd string, 6th fret. And I'm playing E on the 5th fret, 2nd string. Now sometimes, instead of playing D7, we might play D9. And this is a root position D9. Root is on the 5th string, 5th fret. Now you take your first, I'm doing that with my 2nd finger. I'm using my 1st finger to get F sharp here at the 4th fret on the 4th string. Now I'm using my 3rd finger to bar the top 3 strings at the 5th fret. And that's a D9. And the intervals are the root, the 3rd, the 7th, the 9th, and the root. That's what we have there. Those are the notes in the chord. Well, no, that's not a root, that's a 5th, excuse me. Root, 3rd, 7, 9, and the 5th. Now you can take that voicing and move that up a whole step up to E9. And E, the root of the chord, is on the 5th string, 7th fret. Same fingering. To this A7 with no root in it. Now, another voicing for a 9th chord, which also doubles as a minor 7 flat 5, but we'll talk about that in my next course. Because the notes of this C sharp minor 7 flat 5 are also the same notes in A9. C sharp, and there's no root in this chord. There's no A in the chord. It's got a C sharp, which is the 3rd. It's got a G, which is the 7th. It's got a B, which is the 9th. And it's got an E, which is the 5th. So if you put an A in there, now you got an A. Now you have an A9 with an A with the root in it. But this is an A9. This is a 9th chord that has no root. So you could take this voicing and use this for A9 for the A chord, the 1 chord, and then you could play D9 and E9, and then back to A9. Now you're playing the blues with 9th chords. Perhaps you've heard this rhythm part. And that's where we take the upper part of this A9 chord, ignore the C sharp, so don't play it. When I say the upper part, I mean the top 3 notes. And if you slide that up a whole step, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 10th fret, or you can do this. You can play the same figure against the 4 chord using the top 3 strings and just moving up a whole step and back. It's a slide. And when you get to the 5 chord, you can do the same thing. And I'm sure you've heard that part many times. It's a very important part to know in playing blues. Sometimes it's terribly overused, but most of the time it's used properly. If you know when to use it. Because I often think of that part as having more of an uptown blues kind of sound. It's a little more cultured sounding, you know. If you ever heard the song Black Cow by Steely Dan. In the corner of my eye. They play that figure because that's a blues. It's a Steely Dan kind of blues, but it's a blues. It's still a blues. So it's knowing when to use that part, but it's a very effective part, and it's another important part to know. So there you've learned how to, we talked about the dominant chords, the voicings, how to use them, how to incorporate them. When do we use them? So I've got a track here that I'll play along with a little bit. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So here's a shuffle in the key of A, and I'm going to play those rhythm parts. Whoops. I thought so. We'll just do this one again. We got 4 guitar parts going. Here's that A7 with no root in it. Here's the D9. Four rhythm parts. I'm going to play the same thing. So now I'm playing call and response with the other chordal part. I'm playing this on the second beat. The other guitar is right square on the 1 on the downbeat. 3, 4, 1. So that's that. That's rhythm. That's the importance of rhythm. To be able to play 4 different rhythm guitar parts, that's what we had going on there. And when I'm playing this, I'm really staying out of the way, because what's going on is you've got a couple of guitar, you got 3 guitars that are pretty much square on that downbeat of every measure. But this part, 1, comes in on the second beat of the measure. And that gives it a different kind of momentum. It gives the forward motion to it, to the whole progression. And it's things like that that keep it interesting for everybody else, because now you've got this great big machine just grooving away and digging in and getting down and right down and dirty and right in the groove and all in the pocket and not letting up. And that's part of the joy, really, of just sitting on a rhythm part and playing it and having fun doing it. So that's my talk about rhythm. Now, if you call up week 4, Chris, we're going to talk about arpeggios now. And a lot of my friends here at Jam Play, people who come to my Q&A, my students at MI, my private students, period. I've heard this said, this is not the first time I've said this, but I've said it many, many times, because I've heard it many times. It's like I've heard that, I don't know how many times I've heard this line. I know all my pentatonic patterns, and I can play in all the boxes, but I'm really bored with what I'm playing. Well, the first thing that I always politely ask somebody is, well, do you know your arpeggios? And 99.9% of the time, the answer is no. People don't know their arpeggios. They go, well, no, I didn't think they were important to learn. Well, that's why you've run up and against a wall. That is the most obvious and underlying reason why your playing sort of stops at a certain point. Because until you really master, and I mean master, when I say master, I mean you can play pentatonically and practically not repeat yourself. Now, there have been a lot of great guitar players in the world of blues and in the world of rock who are great at doing that. For the most part, they don't repeat themselves when they play. That means that you're so much in touch with what you were supposed to know in the world of the minor pentatonic scale or the major pentatonic scale coupled with the minor pentatonic scale, that you can pretty much play uninhibited and not get stuck for something to play. Now, one of my favorite guitar players was the late Mike Bloomfield. And Mike Bloomfield certainly knew his arpeggios and knew a lot more. But he also was very gifted and was a true master of the pentatonic system. And if you don't believe me, and I hope you do, but if you doubt my word, check out an album called, a record called A Long Time Coming by the Electric Flag, which was the band that Mike Bloomfield started after he left the Paul Butterfield Blues Band and went off on his own. And back in the day, back in 1967, 68, 69, 1970, Mike Bloomfield, the two guitar players in this country, well, the two guitar players that were white blues guys that were universally looked at as being the top of the heap were Mike Bloomfield and Eric Clapton. And I grew up on Mike Bloomfield. I am a big Eric Clapton fan, and I became an Eric Clapton fan. But I grew up on Mike's sound. There was something that I heard that I could relate to and understand. But anyway, getting back to my point. If you want to hear somebody playing within the realm of the minor pentatonic scale for a complete song, and really not getting out of there, hardly getting out of that, and introducing any other notes that wouldn't have the character of the minor pentatonic sound. Check out a song called Texas. It's a slow blues. It's a 12/8 blues. Buddy Miles, who was the drummer in the band, sings it and does a ridiculous version singing it. And him and Mike wrote the song, and it's a huge, it's really just a huge guitar solo from Mike Bloomfield. He plays from one end of the song to the other and doesn't repeat himself. And you're going to hear somebody that truly mastered the idea of playing pentatonically and could play a complete whole song and solo and just, you know, blow continuously, answer the vocals, play call and response with the vocals. When the solo comes up, you know, he just tears it up, you know, and just takes the song all the way home to the end. That's mastering something, okay? And Eric Clapton is a master of that. And that's what those guys did. But the point is that B.B. King and Mike Bloomfield were so interconnected because Mike Bloomfield's always said, if I could sing like Ray Charles and play like B.B. King, I'd be happy. Well, I think he nailed the B.B. King part. That's pretty much everybody that I know who's a Bloomfield fan will tell you. You know, in my opinion, I think he, you know, I mean, he certainly, you could tell that B.B. was probably his greatest influence. You know, besides, you know, he did listen to Albert, he did listen to Freddie, he learned what they did, and all the Chicago guys, and Buddy Guy, and Otis Rush. You can hear that in his playing. You can hear all of that. But the sensibility that he played with came from B.B. King, in my opinion. Why? Because the difference is that B.B. knew his arpeggios. He knew, the great fallacy about B.B. King was that he didn't know, people used to say, well, he didn't really know what he was playing. He knew everything that he was playing. He knew everything about what he was playing when things were coming, when he was playing solos. He knew exactly what he was doing. And that's why he didn't really run out of ideas, because he was very connected to the arpeggios. So what's an arpeggio? An arpeggio, the arpeggio is the notes of a chord, any given chord, played singularly. So in terms of the blues, we're going to play dominant seventh arpeggios. And this is an A7 arpeggio, which begins at the 5th fret on the 6th string. Root, position A. C sharp with my pinky at the 9th fret. E, which is the 5th on the 5th string, 7th fret. G on the 4th string, 5th fret. That's the first octave. Now we're into the second octave, which is A on the 4th string, 7th fret. C sharp on the 3rd string, 6th fret. E, which is the 5th on the 5th string, 5th fret. G on the 2nd string, 8th fret, and the root of A on the 1st string, 5th fret. Okay, now the next pattern begins on C sharp. So we just simply take our whole hand and move it up to C sharp right here at the 9th fret. And that's still an A7 arpeggio. I'm playing C sharp, E, that's on the 6th string. I'm playing G on the 5th string, 10th fret. A, the root, on the 12th fret, 5th string. C sharp on the 4th string, 11th fret. E, which is the 5th, on the 3rd string, 9th fret. G, which is the 7th, 3rd string, 12th fret. A, root, 2nd string, 10th fret. C sharp on the 1st string, 9th fret. and grab. Now I'm gonna grab the next position pattern, which begins on the 12th fret on the 5th degree of the chord, which is E. I'm gonna play E at the 12th, G at the 15th, A on the 5th string, 12th fret, C sharp on the 16th fret, 5th string, E, 4th string, 14th fret, G, 12th fret, 3rd string, A, 3rd string, 14th fret, C sharp, 14th fret, 2nd string, E, 1st string, 12th fret. So that's 3 patterns. We're going to do the last one, begins on G at the 15th fret. 15th fret, 17th fret, 6th string, G and A. 16th fret, 2nd string, 5th string, C sharp, E. 4th string, 14th fret, 17th fret, 4th string, G. Excuse me, I'm getting confused just looking at it. A at the third string, 14th fret, C sharp, 2nd string, 14th fret. Now E at the 17th fret, 2nd string, G, 1st string, 15th fret. And now what you've done is you've covered the whole fretboard. Okay? You've covered the whole fretboard with 4 arpeggio patterns. 1 arpeggio for each note in the chord. Okay? Now, along with that, people said, well, always ask me, well, how does that tie in with the minor pentatonic scale? Well, here you go. Here's A minor pentatonic, root position. Here's A7, root position. Here's A minor pentatonic. Played, I'm pretty much just mixing up the minor pentatonic with the dominant 7th arpeggio. Let's see, we got a question here. No, I tell you, B, G, Egar. That's really the best way to do it. That's a very simple method and idea for getting your hand comfortable. As far as integrating it goes, how to integrate it into solos, well, and I'm going to show you that in a second. You know, if you've started to learn, you know, if you're already starting to learn solos by famous guitar players like B.B. King. You learn some Albert King. You know, he gets into the arpeggio just a little bit sometimes. Freddie King was known to do that. You're going to hear Eric Clapton do it. Mike Bloomfield used to do it all the time. When you start to learn their solos, you start to learn a phrase like this. Maybe you hear, you know, what did I do? Instead of going, I went. So I went. So I went. I played the major third, the root, and the seventh. So in essence, I kind of stayed away from the minor third. Actually, I'm playing the minor third there, up here. So that's why, as we like to say, the major third and the minor third coexist in the world of the blues. You can play either or. It's just different guitar players have a different methodology. That's a different thing that they hear when they're playing. So I figured I'd play a little bit for you and play some classic phrases that I'm sure you're somewhat familiar. You've probably heard them before. I'm gonna quote some of my heroes here when I play, and I'm also gonna just play off the top of my head. But I'm gonna be thinking about all those arpeggios, and I'll try to keep it simple for you. So I hope you enjoy this. Minor third. That time I played the major third. That sounds pentatonic. Here's a D7 arpeggio. Mike Bloomfield would do something like this and just play pentatonically. Sorry, John Coltrane keeps following me. Anyway, I hope that all made sense to you musically, but what I was really trying to do was incorporate all the things that I talked about. Playing the chord tones, you know, I mean, obviously sometimes I got up here. Now that may sound like the major pentatonic, and to a large degree, it is in the major pentatonic. But how you follow it and how you come out of it makes all the difference in the world. I see we have a question here. Good question. My decisions about when to play the major third and the minor third are pretty much based on the melody that I'm chasing around when I'm soloing. Because I was improvising. A large part of what I did was improvising. I played a couple of patented phrases that I'm sure had to sound familiar. And as far as the blue note, which is the flat 5, I think that's the note you're referring to. That's in the blues scale. Many times for me, I will incorporate that. I'll play the flat 5 against, really against any chord. I don't really think about, is there a set place, is there one set place? Is there one set chord? Is there one set moment in the solo to play that? It all depends on how you're developing your melodic structure of your soloing. What do you hear? Like if I hear a keyboard, if I'm playing with a great keyboard player, which I usually do, and I listen to what they're not playing, or I listen to what they might throw out at me. So I'm paying attention to that, and I go, oh, he's playing that, all right, maybe I'll drop the flat 5 in here now. But I basically just use it mostly in a chromatic sense, like you heard me go, I'm sure in that solo you heard me. Well, there's the flat 5 right there. You heard me play that. There's the flat 5. So I usually use the flat 5 as kind of a bridge between phrases. I've always looked at it like that. I mean, sometimes I will, kind of hammer away at it if I'm playing. If I hear a keyboard player, I hear the harmony kind of going that way, and I can get a little more, which now the flat 5 is part of that diminished sound. So if you want to get into that territory, that's, now you're crossing over a little more, you're trying to put a foot in the world of jazz. But as far as playing the flat 5 in the blues, it's totally acceptable. I mean, I certainly do it a lot, and I did play a bunch of it. Like I said, I tend to use it as kind of a bridge between phrases for me. I kind of zoom in and out of it kind of quickly, which I think most players do anyway. But I hope that answers your question there, Eyes Without a Face. And you are 100% right. The arpeggio has the major third, and the minor pentatonic has the minor third. And that's why they coexist, because you can play the minor pentatonic against the chord. And we do tend to refer to that as blues tonality. We refer to that as blues tonality. Because there are things that work when we play blues that when you look at them on paper, they're not supposed to work at all, but they do work. The more you play, I don't know, I'm not sure how long you've been playing, how much stuff you do know, what you're working on. But the more you get into blues, you start to find, I remember when I first started getting into blues and started to learn how to play it. And I learned how to play it right, at least I thought I was. I realized that why does this work here but this doesn't work in this song? Because it's blues tonality. That's part of the language of the blues. That's why it works with jazz. Because in jazz, Miles Davis used to say there is no such thing as a wrong note. So if there's no such thing as a wrong note, it's how you surround that note in jazz to make it sound acceptable against the chords that you're playing. So kind of the same holds true for blues tonality. Has a lot to do with that. Why does that C, why does that note work? It just does, because it's the nature of the blues. So I guess there's no more questions here. Anyway, I hope you, those of you that are here today that came, no matter where you are, I hope you enjoyed. I really hope you enjoyed the last 10 weeks. I know I certainly did. I love teaching. I love teaching about blues. I love teaching about any genre that I'm really familiar with. And we got a lot of that at Jam Play and True Fire. So, there's certainly enough resources out there. I want to say it's been a real pleasure to spend an hour with you all every week, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Like I said, I love talking about this stuff. I love answering people. I love helping people with their questions and helping you to get where you want to get as a musician and as a guitar player. We all need a little push. We all need a little guidance sometimes. We just need somebody sometimes to explain how to do it, So, this stuff has all been archived here at Jam Play. The backing tracks that I've done are available. We've got 9 weeks of tab written out, tab and notation, the things that I've taught. Feel free to come over and take a look at it all. If you're not a member yet, then I highly advise you to check out the site and come on over and you're going to find there's a lot of talented players here, people that I tune in, and this is no lie. Before I usually log on for my Q&As, I usually look to see who's on, and I'll sit by, and I've certainly learned things from listening to other people talk, and you never know who you're going to learn from, So get out there and keep loving the blues, and remember, as long as you play it, as long as you're still playing it, then you're keeping the music alive, and that's really what's important. That's what matters. If you're keeping that music, if you're keeping the blues alive, it's not going to die, and it's being passed on to you, and you can pass it down, and then for that person who mentioned the connection to jazz, I would highly recommend you start listening to Grant Green. Check out Grant Green. Check out Kenny Burrell, a great record called Midnight Blue by Kenny Burrell. It's a blues record with jazz musicians. It's a jazz record. It's a blues record. I don't know, it's all the same. But you're going to hear some very soulful and very meaningful playing. Same with Grant Green, Wes Montgomery, people like that, the great Horace Parlan, piano player, Miles Davis, Coltrane, they all played the blues. So I would say check it out and listen to it and see where it leads you, So it's been a pleasure. If you're a member of Jam Play, come by and visit me at my Q&A on Mondays and Thursdays and Saturdays. And it's been great hanging out with you. Have a great rest of your evening. Take care.